Good morning, Adab. So today I've been asked to talk about a course that I've been teaching for the last 4 years and developing consistently at Habib, which is a course called Program Planning and Design. And I'm hoping to start with giving you a bit of a taste of the course, metaphorically. So let's see how this goes. All right. So the course, so my talk is titled Pedagogy, Praxis, and Lasagna. So you must be wondering, what has lasagna got to do with program planning and design? So I ask you a first question. So you've been meeting with an Italian family who's visiting Pakistan, and you've learned that lasagna is their favorite dish. So now you decided that you're going to serve lasagna, but you've never cooked lasagna before, and you've never tasted it. Where would you start? Any thoughts? YouTube, okay. So you do some research, all right? So you get a formula. What else do you do? Maybe taste it at somebody else's house or order it. Okay, all right. Then what else do you do? Okay, so how do you prepare? How do you plan to cook it? What do you do first? Okay, you purchase ingredients. So what do you need in lasagna? Has anybody tried lasagna? So what goes in lasagna? Okay, you buy lasagna noodles. ठीक है, कीमा जाता है शायद, vegetarian हो तो you might want to get some vegetables, all right? तो उसके लिए आपको देखना होता है कि कितने मिक़दार में आपने चीज़ें खरीदनी है. उसके लिए आपको बजट की शायद ज़रूरत हो. यस, ठीक है. तो आप एक बजट बनाएंगे, आप देखेंगे कितने लोगों के लिए मैंने बनाना है. आपके पास जो है उसके टूल्स है, औजार है. किचन में जो है आपके पास गैस है कि नहीं, आजकल गैस का बड़ा मसला चल रहा है. ठीक है, तो आप देखेंगे कि गैस का चूल्हा है आपके पास सारे इंग्रेडिएंट्स है. ठीक है, और फिर आप शुरू करेंगे. अच्छा, आप शुरू तो करेंगे, बट हाउ डू यू नो यू आर ऑन द राइट ट्रैक? क्या करेंगे? What will you do? Okay, and? All right, follow along video. What else? You might want to taste it. You might want to chakho it to see नमक ज़्यादा है, मिर्च ज़्यादा हो गई, जायका कैसा है, ठीक है? Maybe you want to look at the photographs and look and see whether it looks like what it's supposed to look like, right? Those are things you may want to think about. And then, okay, you serve the lasagna to this family. ठीक है? How do you know that the experiment is a success? Feedback, ठीक है? Dish खाली हो गई? किसी का पेट खराब नहीं हुआ? ठीक है? So you want to be able to check. So what is this? This entire process, this is my first class in program planning and design. Okay? And what we do in this class is we begin to look at the stages of how do you plan and you design. How do you assess? How do you make sure you're on the right track? And how do you get to the end and make sure that you are engaged? Now that tells you a little bit about myself, and that maybe I enjoy cooking and I enjoy eating. And so this is me to tell you a little bit about my pedagogy and how I came to approach things in a particular way. So the picture you see over here is me with my teacher, Kausar Saeed Khan, and a friend of mine, and we are at the Aurat March. That tells you a little bit more about me. So I'm a feminist, I am an activist, I am an academic, and I'm also a practitioner. So my experience of how I teach, how I engage, is very much connected to who I am. And as activists and as practitioners, as feminists, this self-reflexivity is a very important way in which we do feminist pedagogy. So this is just to talk a little bit about that. So Kausar actually introduced me to Paulo Freire. Now, Paulo Freire was a Brazilian theorist, and he was also a practitioner and a popular education expert. He wouldn't call himself an expert, though. And Paulo Freire talked about how we learn. So if you look at this visual, and you look at the person, you see there's a petrol pump, and there's somebody who's pumping information into somebody's head. How do you think that student or that person is feeling as the information is being pumped into their head? Overwhelmed. What's the body language like? Passive, uncomfortable. ठीक है? तो many times we think कि just because हम लोग मालूमात लोगों को दे रहे हैं, उनके सर में ठोस रहे हैं, इसका मतलब है कि हम लोगों को पढ़ा रहे हैं, right? But the thing is, learning doesn't happen that way. And we need to acknowledge that there's a shift in the way we need to teach, and also that the person who is a recipient of the information you are sharing is actually also a knowledge creator themselves. So this is a different image. This is an image from an article I recently published in Alliance magazine, in an article that talks about the decolonization of knowledge. So what does this image tell you about how people learn? Okay, so you see different mediums. You see there's an activity. People are engaged physically in things. They are engaged in contemplation. You see there's art. You see there's visuals. You see there's conversations happening. You see there's practical experience happening in it. And that there's a community that is being created in that learning space. So these are very important ways in which feminists talk about pedagogy. And this is the way I teach and I learn. So if I talk a little bit about my profession or my field, that's social development and policy, and it's very much an applied field. So what we're trying to really do is that it requires taking theory and putting it into practice. And how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we teach that with our students? This is really the dilemma we're constantly challenged with. So when we talk about this notion of praxis, and that was the title of my talk, which is Pedagogy, Praxis in Lasagna, praxis actually comes from Paulo Freire's work, where Paulo Freire talked about the idea that you have a theory or an idea, and then you reflect on it, and then you put it in action, and you reflect on it again, and it's a cycle, okay? And so this is really the way approaches to learning happen, and particularly in an applied field like mine. And so if you think about it, the type of questions that we as people in social development and policy are interested in, we're interested in, better access to clean water. We're interested in, for example, addressing issues of menstrual hygiene. Maybe we're interested in climate resilience. And we're also interested in making sure that policies are designed and implemented in a way so that people jinki awaaz suni nahi jati ya sunai nahi deti, their needs are met and their voices are heard, right? So how do we do that? This is the question, and how do we prepare students for this type of work? So that's the question. And how do we address the gap that many employers have when we hire students, right? Students get hired, and they don't have a lot of skill sets on how to actually address these practical gaps. So one of the things that you may want to think about is what are the skill sets are required. So as a practitioner, when I started to hire people, I realized, oh my goodness, the students that I'm hiring, they don't know how to make a budget. It's a very simple thing, but they don't know how to make a budget. They wouldn't know how to write a concept note, for example. If I needed to write a funding proposal, they didn't have applied research skills. So they knew about research, but they didn't know how to develop a tool to get information. If I decided to ask them, okay, what are you going to do with this information? How are you going to use it to actually design something? Those gaps were really big. And so what we wanted to do is to try and think about a course that would allow students to do this type of work. So what did we do? Designed a course which is called Program Planning and Design. Now, in that course, we have some very interesting components that I'm going to talk about. So we're bringing a whole bunch of things together. It's a dual-track course. The dual-track course means once we have content, which means a topic or a topic of interest. So for example, we partnered with industry. So this time we partnered with Pathfinder International on a reproductive health and climate change program. They're working in Tharparkar. And so what we did is we asked them, will you partner with us to help to teach students how to do this work? And they said, yes, we'd be very interested because we're always looking and always struggling with the fact that we don't have students who are trained to do the type of work and we don't have the time to teach them ourselves. If we do this type of partnership, we're able to actually get students who know how to do this work and we can immediately hire them. So this was really exciting for them as well. So we proposed this idea. Now, how do we want to teach this? So we will design a request for proposals. And we will ask students to work on this request for proposals throughout the entire semester. We will take them to the field so they get to actually experience what it's like to see the lives of the people they're designing this work for and engage with them. Then they continued to have this mentorship program with them throughout the semester where the community workers were actually talking to the students consistently through WhatsApp groups where they were interested in asking questions about context, about what works, what doesn't work, and how do we actually design something that is useful to the communities that actually are going to use this work. And actually those students who designed the projects, they applied them with Pathfinder International, which is super exciting. So we designed the content, so they got to have knowledge about the issue, which is climate change and reproductive health, and how those two things are connected in the context of Tharparkar. We talked about the practical skill set, so they actually had to design a concept note, they had to write a budget, they had to do research के यहाँ से जो है Tharparkar जाने के लिए fuel कितना लगेगा आपको, गाड़ी की rental कितनी होगी, खाना जो है कितना उसके लिए कॉस्ट कितना होगा, वहाँ रिहाइश के लिए कितने पैसे लगेंगे आपको, आपको अगर कोई चीज़ मटेरियल पब्लिश करनी है तो उसकी जो है छपाई के लिए कितने पैसे लगेंगे, और आप इनोवेशन जो है इस्तेमाल करेंगे. तो उन्होंने जैसे डिज़ाइन किए थे कि हम कम्युनिटीज़ के साथ जब बातचीत करेंगे रिप्रोडक्टिव हेल्थ और क्लाइमेट चेंज, तो उसका जो ज़रिया किस तरह होगा, हम फिल्म बनाएंगे या हम जो है पजल्स बनाएंगे या हम जो है कोई किताब बनाएंगे या इलस्ट्रेशंस बनाएंगे. सो दीज वर ऑल रियली इंटरेस्टेड इनोवेटिव projects that ended up being used by the organization that actually partnered with us. What is also really exciting is that the course was run as a team-based course. So one of the key things also that employers are looking for, and myself as somebody who hires people, are looking for is to be able to work as a team and being able to lead a team. And so it became really interesting to run this course in a team-based way. Now, as a team-based approach, the second core class that we have is actually the Program Planning Olympics. So what students actually do is we have like a whole session on team building, which is outside the classroom. We leave the classroom behind, and we do a lot of activities actually in the garden here at Habib. We set up an obstacle course. They have a whole bunch of activities, and the teams are set up randomly. Now, this is done deliberately because you are not sure who you're going to end up working with when you actually go into real life. And that's exactly what happens. So the students don't know who are they going to end up in the class as a team. And then we set up a bunch of different colors. People select a color, and they end up in that team. And they have to work with that team for the entire semester. And then they have to deal with their issues. They have to deal with their nakhras. They have to deal with people not doing the work, So this is a really interesting and important thing. Students, how do we assess them in terms of how the team is doing? They all have to learn to write meeting minutes. Amazingly, most students that I hired after they graduated, before anybody took this class, didn't know how to write meeting minutes, because these are things we don't usually teach in a class. But it's a really important skill set. So I assess the students in terms of how the class is going by looking at their meeting minutes. Every class that the students do is set up as a particular section of a proposal that they're designing. So it starts with a literature review, which is all applied work from what they've been learning for the last 3 semesters in the social development and policy program. It then follows through to talking about how to write a concept note. Then they go into the more details of putting a theory of change together, which is basically how is change supposed to happen through this particular intervention. They go in and talk to people in the field who are doing this type of work. We go into the field and do field visits. And then after that, they come back. And it's amazing the shift in thinking that happens when you take the classroom to the field. Because it's only then that people really realize that you're talking about real people's lives, and it's not just about something hypothetical. And it's after that that we begin to actually go through the processes of developing a budget, of using Excel, of actually deciding on what your team looks like. We write job descriptions, and then asking to actually figure out how much it costs to hire people. It's really interesting when I asked SCP students, okay, so how much do you think you'll get paid to do this type of work once you graduate? And it's really, they actually have to go and do research to realize what their actual tankha would be. So we do all of these practical things to the point where when we have a ready proposal, we then ask the students that they have to put a twist in it. We ask them, you have to present in at least Urdu. So the presentation is done for community members who this whole project is designed for, and ask their community workers then give feedback on their proposals. And they are part of the grading process as well. And this is the way we complete the process. So this is our class. This is the Social Development and Policy class from last year. These are all the students who then did a presentation for Pathfinder International, and we had all the participants from Tharparkar on Zoom. And they made these presentations. They gave handouts in Urdu. And I have to say, the majority of this class is now employed, thanks to some of the skill sets that they've learned in the class. So thank you very much.